Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gaming Daddy channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So I feel like it's time for us to reopen this file, which is pretty much a discussion, or I call it a conversation around the Division 2 and if we're going to be receiving more content and what the scope of that content may be, and if even the franchise will be receiving any continuation if this one is over, or if they finally call it quits on this particular game itself. Now, if you were to ask me from, say a slightly biased perspective, I'll say the Division 2 was able to fulfill whatever it was able to fulfill in the time that it was given to fulfill it. There's a lot of conversation in the community that the game changed too much from the first game. Honestly, it's like complaining about left tweaks and right tweaks, because the Division 1 is still a live game, and from time to time, we agents would jump in and play it. I would have been somewhat bored if they had made the exact same game, or if they had kept a lot of the mechanics. I think changing things, I've come to reconcile that, that was interesting enough, because I still have a copy of my Division 1. I can still go back and play and do all of that stuff. But maybe that's a shallow way to look at it. But let's kind of focus on what's really in front of us today, which is there going to be pretty much any new content that comes down the line, or are we kind of in a place where we're just going to be stuck? Because there are people who have expressed a lot of concerns. In fact, one comment I saw explicitly from one of my audience members said, "I don't trust anything that Massive Ubisoft says," and I don't blame them. Massive Ubisoft from the days of the Division 1 have been in our really interesting books all this while. I can't forget a lot of the things that they did, a lot of the things that they said, but on watching this studio very well, it seems like there are so many, wheels in their little machine that stuff gets broken a lot. And so I've come to the terms that, whatever they say, I usually take it with, kind of that mind that if I don't see it, I don't believe it. But nonetheless, I don't close my ears to the whisperings and to the different, circumstances around those things, and which will be the fact that we heard the developers pretty much, come out and confirm that they were working on some content that's going to be coming down the pipeline. They even said that they had decided to finish the game after the Fallout Manhunt, but instead they decided that they were going to go ahead and bring some more content. This was after an Ubisoft exec in an earnings call pretty much answered the question of an investor who had some concerns about the Division, because Ubisoft is currently working on Avatar and is working on Star Wars. So their deal was, what's going to happen to the Division? Are you guys continue going to, support it? And, this big exec said, yes, they're going to continue to support the Division in the year and the year beyond. So confirmation from one of the top brasses there, and then also confirmations from the developers. I guess that's something that we can probably go on. Now, if they decide to change up everything, all they need to do is say, hey, we're no longer going to bring this content. It didn't work out. So I guess until then, we can expect that content is coming. So it's kind of weird. You can kind of expect and not expect at the same time, because there is an interest that actually fuels and drives this. If you look at the interest, it's money. So are these guys going to be in a position where they have something that is worth players coming into, or worth players, paying for? And I think that's a question that we need to answer. So what is this content? When are we going to see it? And at least what will be the projected timeline? Because if we wait for Massive Ubisoft to give us a timeline, we're going to be sitting here, pretty much breathing dust, because they are very quiet about a lot of things that they do, in terms of their timeline. So I think we can kind of extrapolate from a few things. Massive Ubisoft is pretty much coordinating the development of this new content piece, right? That's number one. Number two, they're actually having the content being developed in other sister studios who have experience working with the Division game. So you have studios like Ubisoft and Anarchy working on the game. You have studios like Red Storm who worked on the Division. You have Ubisoft Bucharest. You have Ubisoft Reflections who have also worked on the Division in terms of actually making content for the game. So you have all these studios lined up. So Massive is coordinating it. Yannick is kind of ahead, of all of that stuff. He's the associate creative director of the Division 2. And so that's pretty much how we've been led to believe that this stuff is structured, because the top brass at Ubisoft at that earnings call said, he said to the investors that there are sister studios who are able to do this. And so it brings us closer and closer to this particular timeline where end of the year or so, this content is going to be coming out. We're in May, and what's approaching very soon is June. June is usually that game information, or game, I would say, propagation of news time of the year, where June June, July, conferences like E3, and in the case of no E3 anymore, Game Fest, or some of these big studios and publishers now do their own events anyways. They don't have to worry about E3 because everybody can just watch your event on the internet. And Ubisoft is going to be having the Ubisoft Forward event coming up pretty soon. Now, could this be the time where we get some more information about the Division 2? Perhaps. Perhaps not. I don't know what this company is planning on doing, but in the last Ubisoft Forward, we actually got some information on the Division. It was a small update. Yannick came up and talked about the potential of bringing a new mode, which was a Project Nightmare mode that they wanted to do. And they were going to coordinate this, I think, with a little bit of Resident Evil stuff, but it did not work out. There was so much that the team said that they had actually gone through, and, they just said they couldn't bring the content. Now, when I say stuff like this in game development and talk about how game development is quite unique from other aspects, I usually get some pushback. And I understand, a lot of us that play the Division, we do crazy jobs. Some of us work retail. Some of us work in the medical field. Some of us work in, trucking and delivery. A lot of these high expectation jobs where a lot relies on us. And so whenever you say things like, oh, well, the developers got affected by COVID, some people say, man, that's nonsense. You can't give the developers any excuse or any out. And I get it. I understand. You can't give them any out, but the nature of their job is not sophisticated at all. It's kind of really old school in a weird sense. There's a way that they do things with multiple hundreds of people. And there's a way that they, I think in an old school way, want their processes to go. Game development has not really evolved too much. It's a painstaking, unnecessarily long process to make the games of nowadays, because all of these studios, for them, competition is making the game that people can play for hundreds of hours. They want to impress themselves, who are basically other developers, and they want to be the people who are saying, oh, our game is being played for so many hours, and our game looks like this, and our game is able to achieve these things. So when you kind of factor in all of that stuff together, it's not necessarily a process that's streamlined for easy development and easy deployment. Another example that I'll give you guys is one that is really close to home. I'm a big Batman fan, played most of the Batman games, if not all of them, that I've been able to get my hands on. And the studio that actually has been working on a Batman themed game that was supposed to come out this year came out a few months ago and said they were postponing it to 2022. Now, granted, this studio has not released a single video game since about 2011, which is insane because the last video game they released in 2011, yes, they kind of had a little bit of help in terms of taking assets from another sister studio. They were able to drop this game in a matter of about 3 years. Since they dropped that game, they have not made a game for themselves. They've made DLC for another game that came out but with another studio. But themselves, they've had their video games canceled. They've had their projects actually change scope, and they've had to change leadership. In fact, right now, the head of that studio for that right now was a former Ubisoft exec or a former Ubisoft creative director who came from another Ubisoft studio to go help them try to ship this game that they've already delayed. Now, when you ask me what's going on, there's a lot of corporate waste, in my opinion. I think a lot of the big corporations, kind of have this little weird petty thing where sometimes they want to call the shots too much. And the people who are calling the shots know very little about what gamers like and somehow strong arm the creativity of the developers. This could be the case in some aspects. In fact, rumors have even had it that the Division 2, Ubisoft wanted to pull the plug on this game, but it was Massive who basically went to bat and said, no, we actually have some ideas. We feel like we can actually do something to continue this game. These are rumors. But if you ask me, I don't think those are far-fetched. So when you add all of this stuff together, you kind of look at what we know about the gaming industry. I'm not surprised that we don't have any content right now for the Division 2, and I won't be surprised if the content that we get is not really big, or if we even get some announcement that the content's postponed. In fact, I'm gearing up for the possibility that we don't get any content in the game, even though I'll tell you that I think there's a huge motivation, there's a huge incentive, and there's a lot of interest financially for stockholders, shareholders, and investors for them to be able to continue with this franchise. It's a lot. So let me tell you exactly why. You see, Massive has 2 games that they're working on. Sure, those two games have fan bases that are kind of, away from the Division cycle. Star Wars has its own fan base. People who like Star Wars, when Massive releases the Star Wars game, people are going to buy it. They don't know who Julian Garrity is, but they know that Star Wars is Star Wars. It's you and me, the Division players, who know Julian Garrity. And so whether or not you like his development or creative style, the Star Wars players are not going to know that until they actually experience it. And who knows? He may do a good job, or he may be able to impress that fan base, and Ubisoft's able to keep that franchise going. Then you also have Avatar. It's a game that, not a lot of people are really enthusiastic about, but still one because it's a movie-based franchise that Ubisoft and Massive have to deliver on. You add these pressures, and you kind of think about it and say, where does Tom Clancy The Division actually fall in all of this? The truth is, if they leverage and actually finish out this game, The Division 2, with a big bang, they're liable to actually pull this community into one or both of those games down in the future. And I think that's a very huge audience to actually leverage or actually bring into your game. Now, you even think about it, the Division 1 and 2 has had a total of about 40 million players. If you take that 40 million players and say you slash it for, say, 30 million players in the Division 1, 10 million players in Division 2, all they need is about 10 to 20% of the player base from the Division 2 to also add to that whatever fandom the Star Wars base or Avatar base is going to have. And I'm telling you, they actually have a secured number of heavy hitting copies that they can actually pull. Not to talk about the new people who may come into this franchise, new people who may go to their studio pages and even still purchase Division copies, which are still selling till date, by the way. There are people who have bought the $9 version, people who bought the $3, $60, and $120 versions as well. You think about all of this, it makes a whole lot of sense that that content come what may, that Massive Ubisoft brings this content to the community. But either way, prepare yourself for all three possibilities: that there's content that comes out with a big bang, or an announcement that there will be no content, or the content shows up and you're not impressed by it. Either way, I guess time is the only thing that we have right now, and it's going to tell where we stand as the community. But I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Talk to me. This is all really interesting. The time is coming that we get, more announcements. So I think we need to continue this conversation. And if anybody knows anything, if anybody is on the I don't know, leave an anonymous comment or something. I'm usually not too curious about, insider information, but time is drawing near, so it really doesn't matter. But if you look at just regular analysis, there's nothing too far-fetched that this company is not wanting to make more content for this particular game or franchise. Talk to you guys in another one. Peace out.